Still in our arithmetic chapter, this section is on variables and expressions. So let's look at some definitions at the top that you need to be familiar with. A letter that represents a value is called a variable. It just stands in for a value. A combination of operations on letters or on variables and numbers is called an algebraic expression. Notice, it's just operations, variables, and numbers, like 3x minus 5. There's no equal sign. The add-ins of an expression are called the terms. So 3x minus 5 has two terms, 3x and negative 5. A term that only has a number part is called a constant term. So in this example, 3x minus 5, negative 5 is your constant term. A term that contains a variable is called, as you might suspect, a variable term. So in that same example, 3x is your variable term. Constant terms and variable terms are not alike, they're different. The number factor in front of a variable term is called the coefficient. So in that example, our variable term is 3x, the coefficient is 3. Terms with the same variable factors are called like terms. And we're going to look some more at this last one, like terms. So let's go ahead and start with example 1. It says combine like terms, and right above that it says combining like terms means putting together the terms with the same exact variable, exact same. So here I have 4 x's and 6 x's make 10 x's. Not x squared, we're not multiplying. 4x and 6x is 10x. Y, take away 5y, you have to think of that as 1y. We don't usually show a 1 if the coefficient is 1, but you can. 1 take away 5 is negative 4 y's. Here we have 3 terms, a variable term, and a constant term. The variable terms are like because they're both x's and they're both squareds. So 3x squareds and 5x squareds is 8x squareds, and the negative 2 doesn't have anything to combine with, so you just tack it on to the end, and what you get is another simplified algebraic expression. And that brings us to this. A simplified expression is an expression whose like terms have already been combined completely. So this is simplified up here. Let's look at example 2a. 6x plus 2x minus 5. The first two are like, that makes 8x, but the negative 5 is not like. Don't think that makes 3x because it doesn't. Here, the ones that are alike are 4x. Now, I want you to get used to using the sign goes with the term. So 4x, take away 5x. So negative 1x, and then we have a positive 2 and a positive 3 make a positive 5. Now you could also write it like this, negative x plus 5. You don't have to show the 1, but it's okay if you do. Here, if we put together like terms, I've got 2x plus 4x, 6x, I'm going to cross those off because I used them, 3y, take away 10y, negative 7y, and negative 5 and positive 11, positive 6. So you are only putting together things that are like. All right, let's look at another property. We talked about properties in another video. This property is called the distributive property, and it's probably the most used property, or one of the most used properties in algebra. And what it says is, if A, B, and C are numbers, then if you want to multiply C times the sum or difference of A and B, that's the same thing as taking that C and distributing it to each one separately. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute. C distributed to the A, C distributed to the negative B. Let's look at a number example. Let's say 2 times 5 minus 3. All right, I'm going to write it a second time. So I'm going to write it like this. Here, I'm going to go ahead and do the 5 minus 3 first. 5 minus 3 is 2, times 2 is 4. Here, I'm going to show you that I could distribute it. Now, you wouldn't really do this with numbers, but we do it with variables. You would say that's the same as 2 times 5 minus 2 times 3, or 10 minus 6, which, yes, it is. It's the same as 4. So, using that distributive property here, we would distribute the 5 to the x and the positive 4. So it would be 5 times x plus 5 times 4 gives us 5x plus 20. Now let me show you a way you can remember this. It's kind of a silly real life example, but it's a good way to remember it. I am a mom to my son and my daughter. And as a group, I would say I'm a mom to the kids as a group. But that's the same thing as saying I have to be mom to my son and I have to be mom to my daughter. I have to distribute myself to both children, or however many kids were in parentheses that make up that group. That's the distributive property. So let's look at this next one, example 4. What is being distributed is a negative 3, and it stays a negative 3 the whole time. So negative 3 times 5a is negative 15a. Now don't write the plus sign yet. Wait till you distribute. Negative 3 times positive 2 is minus 6. That way you end up not having double signs, which you definitely do not want to have double signs. All right, looking at the next page, we're going to continue to distribute, but notice this time it says multiply. So the directions might say multiply, might say distribute. So we've got 8x minus 32, 8 times 4. Here we're going to distribute the 2, distribute to 2 times positive 7x. Now, the 2 does not get distributed to the negative 15. It's outside the parentheses. That's like, let's go back to my mom example. I am mom to my son and daughter, but I might have neighborhood kids that aren't really my responsibility. So when I distribute myself, I'm mom to my son and I'm mom to my daughter, but those neighborhood kids are still neighborhood kids. I didn't distribute. So in this case, the 2 didn't distribute to the negative 15. However, we're not finished because I have like terms to combine. 6 and a negative 15 is a negative 9 plus 14x, or you could have written it 14x minus 9. I actually like this form of the answer better. Notice in number 6, the directions have changed again, and this time they say simplify. So we're going to distribute and combine like terms. So when you see simplify, it means distribute, combine like terms. So I'm going to distribute here a negative 2 times x, negative 2x, negative 2 times negative 5, positive 10. And then here I'm going to distribute a positive 4. Notice I'm including the sign. Positive 4 times 2x, positive 8x. Positive 4 times positive 2, positive 8. And now what we want to do is combine the like terms. So what goes with the negative 2x? A positive 8x. And that makes 6x. What goes with the positive 10? A positive 8. And that makes a positive 18. So not only do you have to be able to distribute, you have to recognize like terms, and you have to know your rules for adding and subtracting integers. So there's a lot going on in these. This is an important one because if you notice, there's a negative outside. Having a negative outside parentheses, like in this case this, is the same thing as having a negative 1. So it's negative 1 times x is negative x. Negative times positive 4, or negative 1 times positive 4 is negative 4. And then we have plus 5x plus 16, those neighborhood kids. Now we combine like terms. Negative x and positive 5x. So a negative 1 and a positive 5 is a positive 4x. And then a negative 4 and a positive 16, you have more positiveness, is a positive 12. All right? This last part is about evaluating an expression. Evaluating an expression means replacing the variable with a number and then finding the value of the expression. So for example, it says evaluate x plus 6 if x is 8. So you take out the x in parentheses, you put the 8 in its place, and then you write the rest, and 8 plus 6 is just 14. So all you're doing is figuring out what this would be worth if x was 8. It says evaluate 2 times x minus y if x is 6 and y is 3. Well, it would be 2. Take out the x, put in the 6, minus y, 3. We don't need to distribute here because I can actually do the subtraction in the parentheses. 6 minus 3 is 3, and I end up with 6. For this one, you've got to be very careful because everywhere there's an x, you're going to put a 35. Everywhere there's a y, you're going to put a 5. So it's going to be x, 35, minus 5, take out the y, put in a 5. Notice they're written side by side. That indicates multiplication. And here's another y, so that's a 5. So what we have is 35 minus 5 times 5 is 25 over 5. 35 minus 25 is 10 over 5 is 2.